back to our debate for Manchester Mayor here on a special edition of Close Up. We have the two candidates seeking to become mayor, Kevin Kavanagh and Jay Rouet. We're going to jump right back into the topics, starting with the opioid crisis. Deadly overdoses are down in Manchester, but overall, opioid overdoses are on the rise again. The city has tried programs like safe stations. Of course, the state has had its Doorways program in place for a while now, but the crisis is still here. What are your new ideas to address the drug addiction issue in Manchester, starting with you, Mr. Rouet?
Sure. So two things on this. This is, at its fundamental level, this is a supply and demand issue. And on the supply side, I think we have to fix our bail reform laws. I think in last year, from April to December, you had 700 people that were arrested, released, and rearrested for serious crimes here in the city of Manchester. We should never allow for violent repeat and dangerous offenders to be let back out onto our streets. And so that's on the supply side, making sure that the police and first responders have all of the resources necessary to combat this. And then on the demand side, where you have people that are hurting, the greatest indication that you are going to have an overdose or a fatal overdose is that you've had a previous one. So we have to meet people at their most vulnerable moments, strengthening our systems when people are coming out of jails, out of hospitals, and creating much better prevention programs within our schools to stop this problem before it develops into something greater later in life. But I think it's the moments of maximum vulnerability that a person has, strengthening those systems, keeping violent repeat and dangerous offenders off of our streets, and providing police and first responders with the resources necessary to address this.
Alderman Kavanagh, same question to you.
Thank you. No, it's a terrible, terrible thing. It's across society. People are dying, and we have to do everything we can. First of all, that's why I've led the efforts to increase the amount of police officers we have by 33. We have to give them all the resources they can to fight the drugs that are on the street, as well as the fire department. The fire department is going out there. We've done that. We've budgeted Rescue One that can go out to these calls, and I think the last month they've responded to 250 different calls. Those are the resources that we're doing, and we can keep on doing that. And again, I'm going to keep on saying that because I'm so proud of having police and fire endorsing me, because these are the people, the men and women on the ground, that are dealing with this problem. The drugs on the street we can clean up, and I agree, if someone is arrested for any kind of selling drugs or domestic violence or gun violence, they should be staying in jail.
Let's turn to city schools. Recent numbers from the Department of Education show that Manchester is 23% below the state average in math and science and 72% below proficiency in reading. Why is Manchester struggling so much, more so than other big cities like Nashua, and what can be done to turn things around? First to you, Alderman Kavanagh.
Well, I can tell you this. I was born and raised here in Manchester, went to public schools. My wife Carrie and I raised our 3 kids here. They all graduated public schools. We see the need, and there are some great accomplishments that are happening, but we have to do more. And that's why I'm proud. Again, when I was in the state Senate, we funded the largest education funding in state history. And we have to do that. I've worked with teachers, friends of mine that are teachers, and tell us what they need. And I'm proud to be endorsed by the Manchester Education Association as well. You know, we have to give them the resources. Manchester is a lot different than a lot of other places. I can tell you a story one time when we had a spaghetti dinner for one of our kids, you know, and it was like the United Nations. It was beautiful to see the diversity we have in Manchester, at Central especially, and we have to accept that, and we do accept that. It's wonderful, and we have to help give all the resources we can to the superintendent, the teachers, and the students, and that's what I'll continue to do as mayor.
Mr. Rouet, how do you improve outcomes in education?
Sure. So every study will tell you that strong public schools equate to a strong city, and I will be a mayor that ensures that we have the best public schools that we can possibly have here in the city of Manchester. The problem that we've been running into is that last year, you know, we spent $250 million on 12,000 students. We're spending more money on fewer students, and we're not getting the increases that we should be seeing in our classrooms. So I think there are a number of things we need to do. First, we have to make sure that there is an environment conducive to learning. So doing everything in our power to stop bullying or any kind of aggressive behavior in our classrooms. That is going to stop kids from learning. And then I also think that we need to have more direct student investment into our classrooms and targeting those kids that may need additional help, like English language learners, kids who may have fallen behind during COVID, or kids with high ACEs scores, adverse childhood experiences. And then I also think parents need to be more involved, not less involved in our students' lives. The best environment for a child to learn are when teachers, parents, and students are working in harmony towards the best educational outcome.
There continues to be a debate about parental rights in schools. Alderman Kavanagh, do you think there is any information about a student that Manchester schools shouldn't share with a safe, loving parent?
You know, there's been tragedies in this past couple months in this public schools, and kids are under so much pressure, and they're taking their lives, and that's heartbreaking to me. You know, I know some of these kids, and it's just awful. And we have to do everything we can to protect them from the pressures that they have. Mental health, again, is, we talk about it here, we have to talk about it with kids. And anything we can do to help them, that we can reduce the stress they're going through, that they think they have to end their lives because there's no better way to do anything, then we've got to do it. And we've got to protect them, because I'd feel like a failure if we lost one more kid as the mayor. And we have to give them all the resources they can to be able to talk to who they feel they're safe with.
So is that a yes, essentially, that some things shouldn't be shared?
I think teachers share things with kids. I think parents share things with kids. And when we're working together, it's going to be better off for these kids. And that's what I agree.
Mr. Rouet, is there anything that Manchester schools shouldn't share with a safe, loving parent?
No, I would go back to my initial comment in my last statement or answer to your question, that I think the best environment for a child to learn is when parents, teachers, and students are working in harmony towards the best educational outcome. I do think that we have a significant mental health crisis that is going on with our youth today, particularly post-COVID, where we had the 2 years when kids were moved during those critical learning periods in their lives. But I think the best way that we can address some of these challenges are having parents more involved in a child's life, not less.
All right, let's get to a evergreen here, commuter rail. A plan has been put forward to connect Boston to New Hampshire. Potential price tag estimated at nearly $800 million. Mr. Rouet, you've told us before you can see the benefits of connecting to Massachusetts, but you're a skeptic. So under what conditions would you actually support commuter rail?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd have to look at, I know there have been a number of plans that have been discussed in the past, so I would have to see the specifics of whatever plan were coming down the pike, so to say. But I think my concerns, I still have the similar concerns that I've always had. The $800 million price tag that we have right now, chances are the next study that comes up, it could be upwards of $1 billion. I worry about the long-term obligating costs of something like this. When you see $17 or $18 million a year, there will be annual operating costs for that. Rider projections tend not to meet, or the projections tend not to hit what they've been projected to over the long term as well. So are we going to see a loss in revenue there? The MBTA running it, that's a cause for concern as well. So I mean, I certainly understand why individuals would be in favor of this, but my first and primary concern is always going to be for the Manchester taxpayer, and I would have to see some pretty clear, compelling evidence to change that opinion.
Alderman Kavanagh, you've been an advocate for commuter rail. How do you ensure Manchester taxpayers don't end up saddled with a disproportionate share of the operating costs down the road?
Well, you have to look at what we're going through. When I was on the Transportation Committee in Concord, there was federal money there to do the study. We have to at least do the study to see. If it's not feasible, then let's not do it. But let's do the study to see. We have an economic engine in the Manchester airport, and we have to connect there. I think it'll be very positive for the entire state if we have rail service. You look at the 100 business owners that want it. You look at the biofab cluster we have in Manchester. That's potentially 7,000 jobs. There's going to be ridership in a rail service, I see. And you look at the future, and you talk about the environment and how many cars can get off the road if we have rail service. Let's look at the study, but I hear the scream of residents and business owners that want rail.
You both mentioned funding for police in your plans to improve public safety. What specifically would you do with that money, starting with you, Alderman Kavanagh?
Well, again, we can talk about action. What we did, we've added 33 positions to the police department. We've given them better equipment for the body cameras that they wear, that will be reactive when they're in a dangerous situation. The new tasers that we're getting them, and everything we can do with the shot spotter that we have, and that's helping them solve crimes when people are shooting guns. Everything we can do with technology, with protecting the police officers and protecting the citizens of Manchester, that's what we'll look at, and that's what we've done. And again, it's when we talk about what I want to do, it's what we are doing and what we're adding to police. And again, I'm going to keep on saying it. They know it. They know what I've done for them, and that's why they've endorsed me. These are the people on the streets that are fighting crime, and they're seeing what we're doing for them, and that's why they've endorsed.
Mr. Rouet, if you spend more money on public safety, where do you allocate it?
Sure. So I think I'm very much a believer in a bottom-up, not a top-down approach. So I would want to meet with Chief Aldenberg, Assistant Chief Marr, and the two relevant unions as well, and ask them what they need. I mean, I know that we have a deficit on our police force right now. We don't have a full complement. So does more money need to be spent on recruiting? Does more money need to be spent on retaining our officers? Are there additional technological advancements that we can make as well to make sure that they're equipped with everything that they need? So I think there are a number of different things. But, also when I talk to police, one of their primary concerns is the need for bail reform. That when they arrest an individual and that person is out on the streets less than 12 hours later before the ink is dry on their paperwork, that is damaging the environment in which they are working. So we should be giving them single thing that we can on a resource perspective. But to make the environment in which they are working better and easier, the next mayor has to be a full-throated supporter of fixing the bail reform laws.
All right, we're going to hit a quick lightning round as we wrap up here, and this is your quick 15-second answers or less, or even yes or no. Do you view the tax cap as a positive or a negative for the administration of city government? Mr. Rouet.
100% positive. The voters in Manchester supported this back in 2009, and I see no reason why we shouldn't. We have to treat our taxpayer dollars.
Alderman Kavanaugh?
Yes, I support it, and we'll always give a budget that I agree on below the tax cap.
Name a street that you've walked during this campaign that needs to get bumped up on the paving schedule. For you,
Union
Mr.
Street.
All right, and you, Mr.
Man, we've knocked on 34,000 doors. There are a number of different ones. I was just on Hughes Road yesterday, door knocking.
Hughes Road? That's it. All right, gentlemen, we're going to get to your final statements after this break.